Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Space of Variations Imago out September 23rd on Napalm Records. The album has 14 tracks, 45 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio record. They are a Ukrainian metalcore band. Now the design of this record is interesting because it matches the sound, and the sound really impacts in a positive way the overall design. The two are intertwined. You can't talk about one without talking about the other. The record has a lot of diversity, has a lot of chaos. It's a very dynamic album, it's a very fluid record that really pushes the boundaries of what the band's sound and what the band's DNA is going to be all about. It's really hard to determine one single element that's part of the DNA when you feel like that one element is morphing, is growing, and is expanding and contracting on every single track. But when you dive deep into this album, I think you're going to find that every single song has a very similar starting point. That is the foundation of the record and is what brings the album together. It's a little bit of the glue that holds everything together as one, and it doesn't allow this album to be as volatile as otherwise would have been. It would have been a complete compilation of tracks just thrown in together if it wasn't for the fact that they have this sort of commonality that really binds them all as one. Now on the other hand, the elastic really stretches on every single song, some more than others. And that's kind of how I approach this album, thinking about an elastic. You hold it on one end, you pull it on the other. Depending on how much power and strength you put into it, the size of the elastic changes. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. The size and how stretched out each song is going to be, it really depends on a track-by-track basis. There's no paradigms, there's no formulas that are put forward that allow you to understand exactly where you are, where you're going. You're just going to take one song at a time, but you're always going to feel comfortable in that process because, like I said, the starting point is very similar. It's just where the finish line is going to be is going to change all the time. But this makes the album have life. It makes the album have energy. It makes the album fluid. It makes the album engaging, and it still feels like you're listening to one single album. Those two elements really work well with one another, and that is one of the reasons why I actually connected with this album so much. If these songs were disconnected, if the finish line was different on every single one of them, but the starting point was also not the same, I don't think this album would have the same impact. The songs would have been great on the individual basis, but not necessarily cooperating with one another to give strength to the collective. As far as the sound experience is concerned, this is a metalcore album, but one that depends heavily on EDM. It has a huge electronic house sound, techno sound that has an impact that really drives the sound that defines each and every single song, or at least most of the songs on this record. Not every track depends on it to drive the experience, to create atmosphere, to create melody, but the majority of the record does, and that becomes the defining moment for the listener. Once you realize that, you start to forget about everything else, and even the songs that don't have it as predominant, they almost get hidden by everything else that happened before and everything else that comes after. So it's a very electronic driven album all around. It puts it in the forefront, but it allows for the record to have great sound. It allows for the album to feel very robust. The sound feels big. It doesn't feel like you're listening to a record. It feels like you're listening almost to a concert in an arena. The sound really travels well on this album. It fills in all the gaps. It fills in all the space. And the electronic elements are doing a huge part of that work, of that heavy lifting, of creating this robust nature that just sounds larger than life. It gives the record also a lot of movement. The movement is forward, laterally, and up and down. This album has movement all over the place. It's undeniable. And I thought that having that much of an electronic push, having that much of an electronic drive would hurt perhaps the other elements like drums, guitars, and even vocals to a certain extent. It wasn't really the case on this album because I felt that regardless of how much the electronic sound, that EDM sound is driving the experience, how much is impacting the experience, the album has enough texture, it has enough layers that you could still hear the drums and guitars and the impact that they're having in the sound experience, and how well they're merged with their electronic counterparts. They really fall in line almost all as one. The electronic sound morphs into the drums morph into the electronic sound, then the electronic sound morphs into the guitars morph into the drums. Everything has its place, but the lines are very blurred across all of them. So this makes the experience feel stronger. It has a little bit more substance. It doesn't feel it doesn't feel devoid of life. It doesn't feel devoid of energy. You're connecting with the sound, and you're connecting with the sound elements individually, but then because the lines are blurred, you're also connecting with them almost as one. And this obviously gives power, it gives energy. Like I said, it gives life, it brings brightness to the overall sound experience, and it has a positive impact in terms of what the atmosphere of the tracks are on the individual basis and your perception of the record overall. And obviously, with the electronic elements being that much of a key factor on this record, the guitars do suffer ever so slightly. I mean, they're still there, they're still driven, there's still moments of heaviness, there's still moments of melody. They intertwine perfectly. There's some tracks that drop those electronic moments, allowing the guitars and drums to have a little bit more of a clear path, to be more direct, to be more raw, if you will, in the terms of the sense of the sound on this album, because it's not a raw sounding album, but when you remove all of that electronic sound, it does feel a little bit more raw from that point of view. So the guitars are still there. They don't have this ability to be in the forefront and drive the experience, but they're a part of that experience. So it's a different way of using them in order to enhance the overall quality of the sound, to enhance the overall nature of the sound. But this is the part, this is part of who they are as a band, and I don't think you can take that away from them. And I don't think you're ever going to see an album, at least for the short time being, from these guys that's going to rely heavily on the guitar sound to drive the experience, to drive the atmosphere, to drive everything that's happening on the record. This album shows you that they can do it, but they rather have it as just another piece of the puzzle and not necessarily becoming the puzzle itself. Now, the vocals are as diverse as the sound is. You have clean vocals, harsh vocals, electronic sounding vocals, different tonalities, different deliveries, different approaches. I mean, this album is a buffet as far as vocal approaches are concerned. The beauty about it is they all fit the songs that they're in. It's not like you're listening to a track and something comes on and you're like, why is this there? You're ruining the song. This didn't need it to be there. No. Every track has the right tone, the right delivery, the right style, the right approach. Not just from the soundscape point of view in terms of what that sound is calling for, but also from a lyrical content point of view. It's a very well-crafted album from that perspective. Understanding exactly what the song calls for and then having the right idea in order to deliver exactly what is being called upon. So I really enjoy the vocals on this record. I actually was surprised on how much I did enjoy them, because this album sound-wise really takes you back. It's a record that hits you really hard, not because it's heavy, just because of the nature of the sound itself. It hits you hard, so it becomes more about the sound, the experience, the atmosphere than the vocal performance. But when the vocals are this good, they allow themselves to jump into the forefront and become more impactful than they would have been otherwise. Now, all around, the uniqueness of this album is interesting. This album has unique textures to it, unique flavors to it, and unique fragrances to it. And that is always an interesting thing when you listen to a record and you feel like you've never heard that sound before. You feel like you've never heard this mixture of elements before. It's always going to stay with you. It's going to be a record that's going to have an impact. Now, it's going to be positive or negative. Well, that depends on the listener. If you like EDM, if you like electronic sound into your metalcore, then this album is going to take you into the stratosphere. This album doesn't just play on Earth. This album goes into outer space. This album has a lot of that sci-fi built into that electronic sound and therefore into the atmosphere of the songs. If you like more of a traditional metalcore sound, then this record perhaps is a little bit too much outside the box. Some songs, the elastic is going to be too stretched out for you to really enjoy it. So it really comes down to where are you comfortable with? What are you looking for? Because this album, while giving you some songs that fit within the box, within a mold, most of the tracks are definitely outside of that box, floating in space. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Slaughterhouse, techno, dance, house, whatever you want to call it. That is the sound, that is the atmosphere that this track offers. It still has a heavy drum, it still has a melodic guitar sound that really permeates and rips itself through the track, and then the vocals create the ebbs and flows that give life and energy to the song itself. Matching the same ebbs and flows that you get in the sound. This song is not linear by no stretches. This song musically has a lot of movement, and the movement that it also has in the vocals. The two are constantly connected in order to give you this sense of going on a roller coaster ride, but a very engaging and entertaining roller coaster ride. It is a heavy electronic sounding track for sure from start to finish, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a bite. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have an edge to it. Now, the repetitiveness of the chorus adds to the fact that this track becomes more memorable. It's easy to remember a track when you're listening to a chorus almost ad nauseum. It works well with the sound, with the electronic approach, with that house, dance, techno sound. Everything comes together. That chorus is pure house, dance, techno sound to it. And then the verses are a little bit more driven. The verses have a little bit more power, but this creates a very unique blend, a very unique experience. Next, you have Outer Space. Talk about being in outer space. This song sounds like it was made in outer space. It has this electronic, sci-fi, spacey vibe experience to it. You feel the guitars, you feel the drums. They have more of a linear impact, if you will, specifically in the verses. And then the chorus is where that spacey electronic sound vibe, atmosphere, whatever it is that you want to call it, comes in and really sets itself apart. This is a track that has great vocals. It doesn't matter if you're in the verses or in the chorus, the vocals are phenomenal. They add to the atmosphere of the song and they match the vibe of the sound in those specific moments. So you're always going to get a very unique performance depending on where you are within the track, helping set the momentums of the song a lot better, helping defining them a lot better. Last but not least, 1 million followers. This is one of the more raw, straight to the point, direct tracks because it doesn't have as much of a dependency on that electronic EDM sound. It's a song that has more of a bass line of guitar, drums, and vocals. Those are the condiments that really drive this experience. So because of that, it feels a little bit more clean. It feels a little bit more raw. It has a little bit more of an edge to it. And it's easier for you to adjust to what's happening within it because it doesn't have all of this sound being packed around you. You feel like there has been some layers removed from it. It feels more stripped down, even though it's not a stripped down song. It just feels stripped down in the context of the overall record. And because of that, it really jumps out. It allows you to feel the heaviness that this track has. And there are moments in this song that are very heavy, drum-wise, guitar-wise, and vocally as well. So it's a song that has different momentums as well. It doesn't stay linear. It has great movement, but it depends more on that core sound of drums, guitars, and vocals to propel you forward and give you the necessary ebbs and flows to make the song dynamic enough. This is it, Space of Variations, Imago, out September 23rd on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.